everybody. Welcome back to The Stories Right Outside Your Door. I am your host, Yoni from Holster Mountain Tours, and welcome to another edition of Lockdown Legends, because we are still on lockdown, so I can't go too far from my house. This week I decided to go really close to my house, and I literally just went up the block so that I can show you this street sign over here where it says Rehov Nechemia. I'm going to be talking about Nechemia, but before I do, wait for that truck to pass by. Before I talk about Nechemia, hi Francesca. Before I talk about Nechemia, I wanted to just say a couple things. First of all, I'm sorry, but my mic isn't working this week, so I'm going to be just on my phone's microphone. So I apologize if there's any problems with the audio. I'll do what I can to project. All throughout my entire school career, all my teachers told me that whenever I tried to whisper to the person next to me, they always heard me because my voice projects. So I'm going to use that now to my advantage. And I'm going to try to project over the bus so that you guys can hear me as good as possible. I also wanted to talk to you about a cool thing. I know a lot of people have been telling me that they want to watch these videos, but they don't know exactly when they're coming. They're not sure what it's happening. And even though I've been saying that it's Wednesdays at 11 o'clock, Facebook doesn't do that great of a job of my marketing, which is fine. It's not Facebook's job, it's my job. So here's what I'm going to do. We're starting a WhatsApp group. If anyone wants to join my WhatsApp group, let me know. Send me a message either in the comments or privately, and I will send me your number, and I will send you a WhatsApp just before each video goes up. That includes the videos that we're doing here for the stories right outside your door, and it also includes the new videos that I'm going to be starting. And that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. The new videos that I'm starting on my YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel. Week's Parshat HaShavua, each week's Torah portion, and I will be relating it somehow to some aspect of pop culture. So far, the pop culture that I've lined up is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Superman, The Godfather, a lot of Godfather actually. I have Star Wars, Harry Potter, a lot of different things that relate. Each of those things relate somehow to that week's Parsha. So tune into my YouTube channel so you can find out how the Parsha relates to any of those things. The trivia question for today, I still don't know what I'm going to ask for the trivia question today. So I'll just come up with something off the top of my head. The trivia question today will be, all right, we'll talk about this later in the video. So I'll talk about this. The trivia question for today is, what holiday is singled out in the book of Nechemia? We're going to be talking about Nechemia today. What holiday is singled out in the book of Nechemia that the Jewish people celebrated? For those of you who are in the WhatsApp group, you should have just gotten a WhatsApp message about all these things. But the trivia question for today is, what Jewish holiday is singled out in the book of Nechemia for celebrating the holiday? So I wanted to choose Nechemia for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm on lockdown, so I can't go too far. Number two, the whole reason for this video series is to show that everyone has stories right outside their door. One of the greatest ways to learn about this country and about the stories is through our street names. The city planners that made the street names, that came up with all the names for the different streets in all the cities throughout this country, were incredibly smart people. And they came up with really good names for all the streets. Some better than others. Like, for example, some of the ones that are not so great. In Yerushalayim, there are two streets named after George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. What's the WhatsApp group? I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Jordana was just sending something out of it right now. Send me a private message, and I'll hook you up with the WhatsApp group. You could write in the comments. You can whatever. You can send me a private message on Facebook, and I'll set you up. Anyways, two streets in Yerushalayim, one named after George Washington, one named after Abraham Lincoln. Now, I need to say this. I love George Washington. I love Abraham Lincoln. I think that they are both amazing human beings. Despite those idiots who are toppling statues of them, they are amazing people. They were amazing people. I question why they need streets named after them in Jerusalem, because what connection did either of those great men have to do with Jerusalem? King George V, good man, not good man, I'm not going to debate that, but he was the king at the time that the British ruled here. So it makes sense that there's a King George Street. Abraham Lincoln, he had nothing to do with Israel. George Washington, nothing to do with Israel. You want a Harry Truman Street? I'm all for a Harry Truman Street. It makes so much sense. And any president after Harry Truman, that all makes sense because they had some kind of relationship with Israel. So sometimes the street names aren't great, but sometimes they are amazing. One of my favorite street names is not far from Lincoln and Washington. There's a street name called Mendele Mocher Sfarim, Mendele the bookseller. If you know who Mendele the bookseller is, I'm not going to say in this video, but if you know who Mendele the bookseller is, Mendele Mocher Sfarim was, write it in the comments. It's one of my favorite street names because it's not a real person. Anyways, so in addition to cool street names and not so cool street names, the street names tell a story. You can Yerushalayim is actually one of the best places to do this because you can go through the city and you can find, you can literally learn the history of the city from just going down different street names. But here in Efrat also, and I'm sure wherever you're living in Israel, they came up with names that can help you learn about your history. I happen to live, Baruch Hashem, I live on Rehov Nechemia. Right next to us is Rehov Ezra. We'll get to that soon. But I live on Rehov Nechemia. And the story of Nechemia is an amazing story. You can learn so much from him. Let's dive in. Let's talk about Nechemia. Let's talk about who he was and why not only is there a street named after him, but there's a book in the Tanakh named after him, in the Bible named after Nechemia. So who was he, and why does he get a street and a book named after him? Well, his story actually starts in Babylon. He was in Babylon, and he was a cupbearer to the king, or emperor, if you really want to be technical about it. But he was a cupbearer. Now, what is a cupbearer? It sounds like a butler. It sounds like someone who just holds his cup, but it probably was a lot more intimate a relationship than that, because as we're going to see in a minute or two, when he was depressed, the king noticed it and said to him, "Hey, what's wrong? Why do you look so sad?" Now, usually, if it was someone who was as lowly as a butler, as a servant who just brings the cup, the king probably wouldn't pay much attention to his mood, probably wouldn't care much about his moods. But the king did care, which indicates to me that the title of cupbearer was more than just someone who holds his cup. It was probably some kind of a confidant, probably some kind of an advisor on some level. So he had this position of power. He had the king's ear. I'm thinking of the relationship of Jared Kushner and Donald Trump. Now, not comparing Donald Trump to the king of the Persian Empire. I'm leaving that comparison out of it because I don't want to get into politics if I can avoid it. But the idea that Jared Kushner, he doesn't have necessarily, he's not a lifelong politician. He's just a guy who's in the right spot at the right time, and he has the ear of the leader of the country. That's kind of like Nechemia. He has the ear of the king. The king, by the way, is named King Artaxerxes, which is one of my favorite king's names of all times. Artaxerxes. Amazing name. Sounds even better in Hebrew, which is Artaxshasta. Just sounds funny. It sounds fun to say Artaxshasta. So he was a cupbearer to King Artaxerxes, and while he was in his position, somebody came to him from Jerusalem by way of Shushan, and he said to Nechemia, "Hey, what's going on? Whatever." And Nechemia said to him, "Hey, what's the story going on in Jerusalem? What's happening?" And the guy told him, "It is the worst. The city is just completely in ruins. The walls have not been rebuilt. Now, people had gone back from exile already. A guy named Zerubbabel and a guy named Ezra had led two groups of people from the Babylonian exile back to Jerusalem. And not only had they led Jews back to Jerusalem, but they had already started to rebuild the temple, the Beit HaMikdash. They started, and service had already begun in the Beit HaMikdash. So you did have Jews in Jerusalem, and you did have the temple service, but the city was a shambles. The city was just in ruins. And one of the main reasons for that was that the walls of the city were completely destroyed. They had been destroyed over 70 years prior to this by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, or in English, Nebuchadnezzar. and they had never been rebuilt. So Nechemia hears this about how terrible the state of the city of Jerusalem is, and it puts him in a funk, and he's in a bad mood. And King Artaxerxes says to him, "What's wrong? Why do you look so depressed?" And he tells him why. He tells him about the city of Jerusalem, about the state of affairs that's going on there. And the king says to him, "You know what? If it's bothering you so much, go fix it. Go take care of it." And he grants him materials. He grants him military escort. He gives him papers that give him safe passage to anywhere he wants to go throughout the entire empire. And Nechemia then goes straight to Jerusalem, and he starts. He wants to start rebuilding, but he wants to get an idea of how serious the situation is first. So as soon as he gets to Jerusalem, he does a survey of the walls around the city. He doesn't want to do this in the daytime, because in the daytime, people are awake and they're around, and people are going to ask him, "Hey, what are you doing? This needs fixing first, and that needs fixing first." And he doesn't want to be bothered by anybody with their own special interests. So he goes at night. Everyone's asleep. Middle of the night, he's riding his horse around the city walls of Jerusalem, the ruined city walls of Jerusalem. And there are some places where he actually can't ride his horse. He has to get off and he has to walk, because the stones are just, they're lying everywhere and they just can't be fixed. So what does Nechemia do? He gathers all the Jews together, and he says, "Okay, here's what's going to happen. We're all going to build the walls together. This is not going to be, the lower class is going to work while the upper class just funds it. No. Everybody's going to do this all together." He was kind of big on this. Nowadays, this would be definitely classified as some form of socialism, and I'm not talking about whether socialism is good or socialism is bad. I'm not getting into those kind of political discussions. But at this point, in the reconstruction of the city of Jerusalem, socialism was necessary. For good or for bad, socialism was necessary. And he said to the people, "We are all going to chip in. We're all going to work together." And he said about assigning a section of the wall to each family or clan of Jews that were living in Jerusalem at the time. He said, "You guys take this one, you guys take that one." And he had everybody building. Now, there were a lot of people who lived here at the time who weren't very happy about this. Remember, the Jews were taken out of their city, taken out of our land, and nature abhors a vacuum. So once we were taken out, other people started streaming in. Non-Jewish people started to live in and around Jerusalem. Well, here we are, and we start rebuilding again, and this bothered them. You see, I think that there's a difference when it comes to people, when it comes to non-Jews, specifically non-Jews who don't like Jews. There's a difference between having Jews around and having Jews establish themselves. And that's especially true here. Ironically, it's especially true here in our homeland. If you speak to a lot of the Palestinian Arabs who live in and around Israel today, especially the older ones who were around before the establishment of the state of Israel, or if you hear testimony from people who were around before the state of Israel, they'll tell you, "We have no problem living with the Jews. Everything is fantastic living with the Jews. We got along with the Jews just fine." I'm not talking about the truth of those statements, because to a certain degree they're not true, to a large degree. But what they do have a problem with is the establishment of the country of Israel. They have a problem with a Jewish state, as it were. And so the same thing was true back then, that the people who were living here, you had Samaritans, you did have Arabs as well. One of them is specifically referred to, one of the main enemies is referred to as Ha'aravi, that he was an Arab. But you have Samaritans, you have Arabs, you have other nations that were living in the area. I think one of them was Assyrian. And they all said, "We don't have a problem with Jews living here, but now you're building up Jerusalem and you're closing the walls, and this we have a problem with. This we can't handle." And first they started writing a letter to the government. They wrote to the king and they're like, "Hey, this is not cool." This guy Nechemia shows up and he starts building the city. The king is like, "Dude, I sent him. I'm not going to do anything to change that." So that didn't work. Then they started to yell at Nechemia. They started to yell at Nechemia and started to attack the people who were building the walls of the city. And so Nechemia goes, "Okay, guys, the people around us are not going to make this easy for us, but we're going to continue anyway. From now on, each team of builders on each section of the wall is going to have a guard with them to keep a lookout, to make sure that nobody comes to harass you. Number two, all of the builders are to be armed. Everyone has to have a weapon on them at all times, even while you're building. It's inconvenient. You have a tool belt with your hammer and your tape measure and all those things. Well, add a sword to that, because from this point on, everyone is to be armed. He also says every group of builders is to have a trumpeter, so that if you are attacked and if you do start fighting, you don't have to be alone. You can't necessarily see the next team on the section of wall beyond where you are. That doesn't matter. You'll sound an alarm and the other teams will come and help you. Sorry it's so busy, but Efrat's just an awesome place, and I live close to a busy street. As you can see from the street sign, it's Nechemia and David HaMelech. David HaMelech gets more traffic because David HaMelech is, I guess, better known, but Nechemia gets plenty of traffic too. Anyways, getting back to the story. So Nechemia not only assigns the workers to each section of the wall, but he ignores any opposition from any of the people around us who don't like that we're building, and he prepares for the eventuality that we might have to fight them. He arms all the workers, and he sets up an alarm system to make sure that others can help in case of an attack. According to the Bible, he finishes the building of the city walls in under 60 days. That is quite a feat. Josephus actually disagrees with him on the timeline, disagrees with the Bible on the timeline. He says that it is actually a little bit longer, but it was finished rather quickly. So the city walls are built and everybody's happy. End of story, right? Not exactly. The story continues. It goes on to say how Ezra teamed up with Nechemia. Nechemia teamed up with Ezra, because we're talking about Nechemia. So it's like a crossover event. It's like in Captain America Civil War, when all the other superheroes came into Captain America's movie. That's what's going on here. That's the kind of thing that I'm going to be doing in my pop culture and the Parsha. I'm going to be taking a story and I'm going to be relating it to a movie, just like I related Nechemia and Ezra to Captain America. So what happens? Ezra comes in the now secured but still kind of run down city of Jerusalem, and on the first day of the 7th month, he starts to read the Torah. Anybody know what the first day of the 7th month is? It's Rosh Hashanah. Today we call it Rosh Hashanah. In the Torah, it does not call it Rosh Hashanah anywhere in the Torah. It just says that on the first day of the 7th month, there is to be a holiday. So on that holiday, which we today call Rosh Hashanah, Ezra gets up on a big wooden platform and he starts reading the Torah to the Jewish people. And the Jewish people respond with a heartfelt Amen, Amen. Amen obviously is something that we say after a bracha, after a blessing, but it also means emet. It also means that what you are reading is true. And this is actually something that Sephardim have maintained, that when Sephardim are in shul, when they're in synagogue, and they read from the Torah, after each section of the Torah that they're done reading, the audience, the community, the congregation will yell out emet, which is similar to what these people did when Ezra was reading the Torah. He would read the Torah and they would yell out amen, which is kind of like saying emet. At some point, they started crying. I don't know exactly which part of the Torah he was reading, but they started crying, they started wailing. And Nechemia steps in, he goes, guys, today is not a sad day. Today's a holiday. Today's a happy day. Don't mourn. Don't cry. We're not spending the whole day here in the temple listening to the Torah and in prayer. We're not doing that. That's not what today's about. Today is a holiday. Today's a happy, festive day. So I want you all guys to go out and have delicious food. Go out and make whatever the most delicious food you can think of, and not only make that food, share it. If there's somebody who can't afford to make their own food, share it with them. Go out and have a great time. And that's one of the reasons why you're actually not allowed to have Rosh Hashanah prayers drag on for too long. There are long prayers that go for like 4 hours or something like that. But if you get someone up there who likes the sound of his own voice and he likes to sing a lot, they can drag on to 5, 6, 7 hours. You got to be careful, because as Nechemia says, and as it's stated in Jewish law, you can't spend the whole day in synagogue. That's not what the day is about. You got to go home. You got to have fun. You got to eat delicious food. You got to spend time with friends and with family. this year was obviously a little bit different and couldn't spend too much time with friends, but you certainly have time to spend with family. You can certainly have delicious foods, which I hope everybody did on this wonderful Rosh Hashanah that just passed. By the way, this was not the only time that Nechemia addressed the needs of the poor. Again, we're talking about Nechemia, we're talking about all the reforms that he made. He made a lot of reforms. He and Ezra both made a lot of reforms. And one of the things that Nechemia told the people, he said, listen, if there's poor people out there and they owe you money, I'm officially calling for a cancellation of debt, because there were some wealthier Jews and there were some poorer Jews. And the wealthier ones loaned money to the poorer ones, and the poorer ones couldn't pay it back because they were really, the whole situation was just miserable at the time. And so Ezra comes along and says, not Ezra, Nechemia comes along and he says, that's it, I'm canceling debts. Again, like a pretty socialist move. But at the same time, he said, you know what? And I am not going to be taking my royal stipend. I'm not going to be taking my salary. I'm going to be giving that out to those who need it. So he actually, he wasn't just a guy who said, all right, you guys can't live the good life, but I will. He said, no, I'm going to tighten my belt also. I'm whatever I'm prescribing for all of you, I'm accepting upon myself as well. And he took a significant pay cut to allow everyone else to have some kind of money. So anyways, after that happened, after they had Rosh Hashanah and after they had a wonderful time with that, they went on, the book of Nechemia goes on to talk about how they celebrated Sukkot, which we just finished up. Last week was my Chol HaMoed video. This is my post-Sukkot video. So it just so happens that I'm talking about Nechemia Street, but in the book of Nechemia, it talks about how they celebrated Sukkot. Everybody went and they built their own sukkah. They built their own temporary house next to their homes, whether it was on their roof or whether it was next to their house, whatever it might have been. It says they went out and they collected different branches for the holiday. Now here's where it gets weird. It talks about the palm frond, it talks about the willow, it talks about the myrtle, but it also mentions that they gathered olive tree branches, and it also mentions that they gathered maple, I think. They gathered a bunch of different trees. And it doesn't say that they took them all together in their prayers and shook them around like we do today. It says that they made their sukkah, they made their tabernacle out of these tree branches. Is this a misunderstanding on their part of what we're supposed to do on the holiday? Or did we initiate something that wasn't done in antiquity and we started doing nowadays? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I couldn't tell you. It's a good question. If you have an idea of the difference between the way that we celebrate Sukkot and the way that they celebrated Sukkot in the days of Nechemia, please let me know in the comments. I'm more than happy to learn new things. So you guys can let me know. But I'll tell you this much. What it does say about the holiday of Sukkot was that there had never been a celebration of the holiday of Sukkot like that since the times of Joshua. That it was the happiest celebration of Sukkot in the history of the Jewish people, which, in my opinion, is saying a lot. But I'm going to let this truck go by because I know that I'm on the phone's mic. Hi, truck. Anyways, getting back to what I was saying, Nechemia also tried to institute a number of religious reforms. The Jews that came back from Babel with Zerubbabel, with Ezra, and some came with Nechemia as well, these were not the intellectual or even the spiritual elite of the Jewish people. These were people who were kind of low down on the ladder of spirituality and of religiosity. And what do I mean by that? These were people who didn't know which day of the week Shabbat was, the Sabbath was, let alone what they needed to do on that day. So Nechemia and Ezra, they get up and they tell the people, hey guys, listen, every 7 days on Shabbat, on Saturday, that's Shabbat. And so the people are like, oh, okay, got it. Shabbat on Saturday, no problem. And so the following Shabbat, the following Saturday, Nechemia went out to the city to see what was going on, and he sees that people are working. They're either working in their storefronts, or they're buying stuff, they're shopping, whatever. And he's like, guys, today's Shabbat. And they're like, yeah, Shabbat, it's awesome. He's like, no, guys, it's Shabbat, and you gotta stop working. It's the day that you take off from work, so you gotta shut down. And they're like, totally. Totally cool. You got it. We'll shut down. No, absolutely, we're going to shut down. And then the next week, he went out, and they were still open. He's like, guys, what are you doing? It's Shabbat. I told you got to shut down. And they're like, I can't shut down. Number one, I got customers coming in. And B, this guy who's not Jewish, he's open. If he's going to be open, I can't stay closed. I gotta compete. So if he's open 7 days a week, I got to be open 7 days a week. And also the people who were shopping, they said, well, what am I going to do? The stores are open. If they're open, sounds like Israel's quarantine. Absolutely. Like you're told to do something and then it just doesn't happen. But yeah, that's for sure. So he actually takes a pretty drastic step. Another truck passing by. These could be our advertisers. I should contact this truck and his parent company. He's actually turning around. He's literally right behind the camera, which is why you hear the beeping. Because a lot of times trucks and other cars will use my street as a place to turn around. I hate that. But this isn't a video about hate. This is a video about lockdown legends. We're not going to get into that. I'm definitely going to call the truck company and see if they can be a sponsor for the program. I mean, who knows how many hundreds of thousands of people just saw that truck drive by twice. So they should definitely kick in something to the video. Anyways, so these people didn't really have an idea of what Shabbat was. So Nechemia took a drastic step. Like I said earlier, this was a case where socialism, good or bad, I'm not talking about the positives or the negatives of socialism right now, but it was a necessary aspect of the rebuilding, not only of the physical, as we saw before, but also, as we see now, of the spiritual development and rebuilding of the Jewish people. And what he did was, he had the city walls that were now strong and rebuilt, he had them locked on Shabbat. He said, you know what? No one's coming in. No customers coming in. No vendors are coming in. It's just going to be the Jewish people. Everything is going to be locked down. Lockdown legends. Everything's going to be locked down on Shabbat. That's it. And he enforced that. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? You guys could argue that in the comments. The bottom line is that's what Nechemia did. He also got the entire population of the Jewish people in Jerusalem at the time to sign an agreement. He came up with a contract to improve their religious ways of life. And there were seven main points that they had to do. I beg your forgiveness. I don't remember the 7 points. If you ask for them in the comments, I'll be happy to respond. Or actually, I'll just post them in the comments. All the 7 main points of of his New Deal, I guess you could call it, with the Jews of Jerusalem, and they all signed it. They didn't exactly live up to it. They didn't exactly keep it, but he had them all sign this agreement of a new code of conduct for the religious life in Jerusalem. If it sounds like the story is kind of fizzling out, that's because that's kind of how the book of Nechemia ends. It ends on kind of like a fizzle. It starts off, I'm going to go rebuild the city, and I'm going to take on these villains, and these people are going to stop me, and we're going to arm ourselves, and then we're going to build, and then we're going to try to fix this, and then we're going to have to do that, and then we're going to have to take care of this detail. And it just kind of fizzles out, which on the one hand is not a great way to end the book. But on the other hand, if it's not just a book, if it's a text on how we should lead our lives, which is what the Bible basically is, it's to help us live our lives a better life, then it's not that bad of a way to end. It's basically saying like, oh, he tried and he didn't quite get it. ... Kind of leaving it open-ended for us to say, well, you know what? We can fix that. We can do that. If they didn't do as well as they should, but we can pick up where they left off. We can start where Nechemia stopped. Maybe they're just being true to the history of the time. And when you write a really accurate history, sometimes you don't have a great ending. Sometimes the story doesn't end perfectly. And so maybe it was just being an accurate report. I don't know. But I see the trivia question rolling on the bottom. Which holiday is singled out? And I would say that holiday is specifically Sukkot. Yes, it talks about what we today call Rosh Hashanah, but even more so, it has a specific emphasis on the holiday of Sukkot, on the Feast of Tabernacles, and how happy and how amazing that feast was. So there's your answer to the trivia question. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. It's a little bit longer than usual. I see I'm upwards of 30 minutes at this point. Usually I keep it to 15, 20 minutes. Upwards of 30 minutes at this point. But I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the story of Nechemia, the guy after whom my block is named. Tell me who your block is named for. Give me a story of who your block is named for, because everyone's got a cool story to their name, to their block. So tell me who your block is named for in the comments. Please, not only should you share this this video if you like, but subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll have a weekly video about the Parsha. And if you want to join the WhatsApp group, I'll include you in the WhatsApp group as well. Till next week, have a great day, everybody.